So, 1692, fun time, right? I mean, around 40 members of the MacDonald clan in Scotland were murdered. Jamaica was pretty much destroyed by natural disasters. And while all that sounds great to talk about today, I'm going to be talking about one of the more notable things that happened that year, being the Salem witch trials. But more specifically, I'm going to be talking about the kind of niche play that was written about it. Don't know if you ever heard of it. It's called The Crucible. So let's just get right into it.
Let's go back to 1630. A new group in England called the English Separatist Church illegally broke from the Church of England and took on the name of the Puritans. Well, let's just say King Charles didn't really like this all too well and essentially said, hey, you guys can't really be doing that stuff here, but I heard there's this really cool new place across the sea. How about you go there? And thus the Puritans set sail to America. The Puritans believed strictly in the idea of God, and that was pretty much it. You were even looked down upon for reading anything but the Bible. They believed that you had to be destined to go to heaven to go to heaven. Even if you were destined, that didn't necessarily mean you were guaranteed to go to heaven. You still had to follow all the Puritan rules to the letter. This absolute love of God led to an absolute hate for anything that would be opposing anything that is not purely God. For example, witches. And now here we are, 1692, the Salem witch trials told through the Crucible. Let's just get into the summary of Act 1. Act 1 starts out with a group of girls doing some not very town-approved things in the woods, such as conjuring spirits, running around with no clothes, eating frogs, making soup. Sounds like a pretty wild party, but that's not how the Puritans see it. Samuel Parris sees this happen and scares them all away, and we find out that his daughter Betty is unconscious because she's obviously bewitched. Because of this, he talks to the head of troublemaking in town, his niece Abigail. Parris is speculative that all of these girls were acting in witchcraft, and Abigail of course denies every accusation thrown at her. We now have John Proctor come into play. He is a very interesting character as he has had an affair with Abigail in the past. He questions Abigail about all of this, and she tells him exactly what they did. He understands that they were just, some hooligans in the woods trying to cause trouble. This is going to be important later. So all the adults congregate about this until Reverend Hale arrives, known to be an expert on witchcraft. He questions Abigail about her night in the woods. And the first moment she gets, she immediately accuses Tituba, a local slave, to making her do witchcraft. This leads to Abigail, Tituba, and even Betty awakes to accuse 39 people of witchcraft, whom all get jailed. Now that about wraps up the basic plot summary of Act 1, and if that wasn't enough drama for you, I present you the high school hallway amount of drama that's in Act 2. Act 2 starts out with John Proctor arriving back home to his wife, Elizabeth Proctor. He makes her aware that he definitely didn't go to Salem because he would absolutely never talk to Abigail again, except oops, he actually did. We learn here that Mary Bourne, a 17-year-old servant to the Proctor household, is an official of the court, despite Elizabeth forbidding her to go to Salem. But don't worry, because she comes back with a gift to Elizabeth. A poppet. How thoughtful of her. On a completely unrelated note, it turns out Elizabeth was accused of being a witch by...
Wow! Isn't that surprising?
They believe Abigail accuses Elizabeth to get her man back. That, and she just doesn't generally like Elizabeth. Two very acceptable reasons for murder, of course. Later, Hale shows up at the house, and Elizabeth assures him that they have never left the devil at the Proctor home. And to prove such a thing, John Proctor attempts to recite all 9 commandments. Unfortunately for him, it turns out there's that 10th commandment he forgot about, adultery. How ironic. So all that debacle doesn't really make the Proctor situation any better, and as a final-ditch effort, John decides to tell Hale about his conversation with Abigail, about how this whole thing is fake. Unfortunately, while he tries to explain this, a whole party of people, including Cheever, a worker of the court, shows up with a permit for Elizabeth's arrest. And right on target with the Proctor's luck, it turns out Abigail was struck by a needle earlier, and there just so happens to be a needle inside that nice poppet Mary gave to Elizabeth, thus framing Elizabeth of witchcraft. And off they go, taking Elizabeth to court. Now, John has one chance to save Elizabeth. Mary has to testify in court. But what will Abigail do if Mary tries to go through with this?
Unfortunately, we won't be finding that out today, as I've only read through Act 2. But if you should take one thing away from these 2 acts, it should be that you should be glad that you don't have to deal with all this paranoia stuff in the modern era. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to go post about someone on Twitter really quick.